even if technologically we fix the technological curve fundamentally, somebody who is monolingual is distinctly disadvantaged in life because he has never learned how to see the world through a different lens. By learning just one other second language, you understand that your thinking abilities are shaped by your language, and you become conscious of how you think differently. Not only do you express yourself differently, but you think differently in languages, and you become more aware of your own thinking. So I'll tell you the chart that I did. And to be clear, I don't believe there's a limit on the number of languages that a child can learn. I think that it's a matter of time. The way that you are teaching your children languages is the best way because it's all through normal interaction. The comprehensible input is all delivered in the context of relationship. For anybody who's interested, the most inspiring video that I found on that, there's a little girl named Bella who was on a Russian game show on YouTube. And you can find it on YouTube. Just search Bella languages and you'll find it, I'm sure. Beautiful little girl, probably 6 years old. And she was fluent in 7 languages, reading and speaking on this game show, proven by interacting with native speakers. And I researched the story because I wanted to see, and her mom had done it all using the techniques that you're employing of individuals who are in her life. She brought in this person, that person, and the other person. And so I think that's the best way. And I've seen some very inspiring stories. I'm just jealous I didn't marry a Chinese speaking wife. I married an English speaking wife.
Which, sorry to interrupt, was not by mistake. I have to put that out there. And my wife knows this. And the first time I told it on air, I was a little bit fearful that she might get angry at me, but I'm going to interrupt and then I will let you continue with your story. So I was very much a big fan of Jim Rogers, who I've now had the privilege of interviewing a half a dozen times. He's spoken on stage at my conference. He's been on my podcast and things like that. But I first read his books well over 20 years ago, where he traveled around the world and he was explaining, 20 some odd years ago, that Mandarin was going to be the rising hegemon and we needed our children to learn Mandarin, which, by the way, he moved his family to Singapore and his children win competitions in Mandarin level, little white children winning Mandarin competitions. But I looked at that, I read that, and I was like, this makes a lot of sense to me. I had traveled extensively through the region, and I purposefully went out there and married a Chinese woman because I wanted to have that experience for my children. Now, I am very forward-thinking individual, and yes, I love my wife more than anything in the whole wide world. I married her because I love her, don't get me wrong, but it didn't happen by accident. I was very purposeful about that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I admire you for doing that. I read Jim Rogers' book, the first one, when I was in high school. I remember getting it from the library. I just didn't follow through on any of it. I wish I had. My undergraduate degree was in international business, but I didn't leave the United States until 4 years ago, until I had 3 children already. And so I'm behind the curve, and I admire you for doing that. So I'll tell you how I calculated this. So the cool thing is none of us should sit around and, if only I had done such and such. We all have a place to start. And I stumbled into this language stuff in a haphazard way, which I'll skip the backstory. But I sat down and I calculated one time, how many languages would it be possible for somebody to learn? And the way that I did it was, number one, I made a list of all of the languages that I was interested in, that I thought had strategic value in the world, or at least in my world. And I chose those languages. And then I used the Foreign Service Institute language difficulty rankings, which is what you alluded to earlier,
yes,
which is a calculation of how much time it takes to learn a language. So for the uninitiated, there is a branch of the US government called the Foreign Service Institute, and it consists of language schools. And what they do is they have government-run language schools where they teach diplomats, military members, anyone who in the US government needs to learn a language. They teach these languages. And they've been doing this for decades, many decades, and they've taught many languages. And so what they have done is taken an estimate of how many classroom hours of instruction they require in order to help someone achieve what I'm going to label as advanced or lower level advanced fluency or advanced intermediate
B2,
fluency.
I think, is kind of
Yeah.
the what they're trying to hit.
Somewhere in the range between B2 and C1 on the European Common Framework for Languages. And what it means is this person is totally competent in all situations, able to translate, able to interact, able even to do diplomacy, but not native like expression, not native accent, not native like, ability. So high degrees of fluency, but not perfect. And they divide languages in tiers, level 1 through level 5, based upon how long it takes. And basically it's how similar or dissimilar it is to these languages are to English. So I'll go through, and I made the list, and I made the list in the order of my interest in these languages. So they're not in level 1 to level 5. But first of all, we of course have English, which is the first language. And thankfully my children are native speakers. Then Spanish is a level 1 language, and the estimate is about 575 to 600 hours. So I used a 600-hour estimate for Spanish. French, and by the way, I used all the basic numbers. Well, I'll come to that in a moment. Then French is the third language. French is a 600-hour level 1 language. German is a 900-hour, basically level 2 language.
Level 2, yep.
Chinese is next, and Chinese is a level 5 language, and the Foreign Service Institute estimates 2,200 hours for a native English speaker to learn Chinese. Then I added Latin. There is no Foreign Service Institute estimate of the difficulty of Latin. I just characterize it as level 1 of 600 hours. Then I added Arabic, which is a level 5, 2,200-hour language. Italian, which is a level 1, 600-hour language. Then I added Greek, I added ancient Greek. They characterize Greek as a level 3 or 4 language.
Yep.
I went ahead and said 2,200 hours. I called it a level 5 language to learn both the ancient and the modern variety. Then I added Japanese, which is 2,200 hours, a level 5 language. Then I added Hebrew for my religious interest in biblical Hebrew, and I characterized that as a level 5 language, even though it's probably not, 2,200 hours. Then I added Portuguese, which is 600 hours, level 1 language. Then I added Russian, which is 1,100 hours. So that's 13 languages total, 12 foreign languages plus English. The total amount of time required to learn all of those languages based upon Foreign Service Institute time requirements would be 16,000 hours. 16,000 hours to learn all those languages. Then I calculated, all right, let's say you spread those 16,000 hours over the course of 10 years. Let's say you start at 8 years old and you've got 10 years from 8 to 18. How many hours would that be? Well, that'd be 1,600 hours per year, or 4.3 hours per day. What if you spread it over 12 years, say from age 6 to age 18 or age 8 to age 20? Well, then it would be 1,333 hours per year, or 3.65 hours per day. So if somebody wanted to be fluent in 12 foreign languages plus native language of English, total of 13 languages, including all those really hard ones, and we included the basic Foreign Service Institute time, then you could do it over 12 years with 3.65, so 3.5 to 4 hours of study per day. And so the next question is, could we discount the time? So for example, my experience with my children learning Spanish and then learning French was that they didn't need 600 hours to learn French to that level of competence. They needed a few hundred hours, because Spanish and French and English are enormously connected. Similar with Chinese and Japanese. If you've learned one, then it's a lot less to learn the second. Same with Arabic and Hebrew. Any related language is just a lower amount of time. So I think this is the highest estimate. So I didn't discount it though, because this is not native fluency or full fluency. But in essence, you could learn that many languages with 3.5 hours per day. Now, here's my point, however, as a homeschooler or as an unschooler, is that a lot of language time? Of course it is. I don't require my children to learn languages for 3.65 hours per day. But what I can do is I can put their activities into the foreign languages, like you do with a Russian Spanish teacher or a Spanish nanny. And so I do this with academic subjects. So I put the academic subjects into foreign languages, not all of them, but many of them. So we read novels in Spanish and French and German, and my son is finishing The Hobbit in Latin right now, and you just kind of adjust it. And then as a world schooler, as somebody who has the ability to come and go, I can put in times of intensive period. So let's go to China and let's spend a month in China, or I'm going to go and I'm going to enroll you in school in Greece for a semester, and I'm going to enroll you into the local government school so you can have a chance to practice your Greek in in a native context. And now all of a sudden, then there's even more time than just the 3 or 4 hours. So my point is that and one more comment is that a lot of people who haven't learned other languages, when you think of learning a language, you almost necessarily think of the way you had a high school Spanish class, which was rote memorization, studying flashcards, boring grammar drills, etc. That's not necessary for learning a language. A lot of language acquisition can come from watching movies in the language with subtitles, reading in the language with tools, reading short stories. And so this can be really pleasurable. So spending 3 to 4 hours a day on language acquisition on the front end might sound really difficult. That's what we do in our household as just normal entertainment. And so it's not my ambition to necessarily teach those 12 languages. But what I wanted to show mathematically is the potential that we have is so much higher. This is totally doable. And if I look at the thousands of hours that the schools would waste of my children's time, and I just put them onto a schedule of 1,000 to 1,500 hours a year of language learning with these pleasurable activities, with cultural opportunities, with foreign travel, with tutors, with nannies, with piano teachers or grannies or whatever you happen to find, these truly incredible results are very predictable. That if I had the clear motivation to achieve these results, it's mathematically achievable. And then everyone would turn around and label my child a genius because they speak 12 foreign languages. No, it's understanding the tools of learning and building an environment that incentivizes that instead of flipping through TikTok all day.
Absolutely, 100%. You just nailed it because you're so right there. And, as you had said, it's actually so much less than that, because I can tell you after studying languages and watching it that, those numbers of 575 hours to 600 hours for a level 1 language comes from a basis of English. But if you are speaking Spanish at a very high level and you now have English and Spanish as 2 high level languages and you go to learn Italian, I can absolutely guarantee you that Italian will come so fast. And then guess what? Portuguese is going to come fast after that. And then French. And then it's like, these are stackable. And actually, this goes full circle to our conversation that we were talking about before on that base of knowledge, right? Just like as I had described, okay, I've read easily, I can confidently say over 1,000 business books in my life. That is a base of knowledge. When you have a base in Latin-based languages, they are stackable. Same in Germanic languages. Same in Japanese, Korean, and Chinese. A lot of that is based off of Mandarin. Mandarin is a mother language. Okay, Teochew and Cantonese and Hokkien, and all of these are dialects of Mandarin. Well, a lot of Japanese and Korean also get their roots from this as well. You can easily look at the alphabets of these languages and see where this comes from. Still today, you can look at Japanese and they use Chinese characters for one of their 3 alphabets. So there's absolutely ties there. So if you have a basis in that, it actually becomes easier. Plus, when you add in the study techniques and the learning techniques that you are going to develop while learning a language, now you really know how to do it. It's hard to learn at the very beginning because you think, all right, I got to go do Rosetta Stone, or I got to sit in a classroom for high school Spanish. And, it's going to be 1 in 10 words that's going to be in Spanish instead of, all 10 words are in Spanish. Like your amount of input is so drastically less in situations like that. Once you figure out how to crack the nut, well, then it's very, very easy to learn a lot of them going forwards. And it's so cool to be able to think in the future on like how this will be done. And as your point of in context, my daughter, okay, she doesn't like Russian, but you know what? She still does her piano lessons a couple days a week in Russian lessons, because we went out there and we found a Russian teacher who teaches piano. And so everything is done in Russian. So if she wants to do piano, which she quite likes piano, she has to do it in Russian. That's the way we negotiated it for her. Okay. She does her art, even though her art teacher, she does private art lessons 3 times a week, 2 hours a day. Her art teacher speaks amazing English, really phenomenal English. You know what? She's doing it all in Spanish anyways because she wants to do art. So art is in Spanish. And as we go forwards, we want to find other activities that she enjoys in different languages that are going to help supplement her broader part of education. She already knows and understands English. She speaks English at a fantastic language. Why does she need to learn every other subject that's out there in that language? And if you even want to take it one step further, let's say, okay, I'm going to completely make up an example, but let's say ballet. Maybe my daughter would fall in love with ballet. Okay, cool. She could get instructions in ballet in English, but who are arguably the best ballet performers, or what countries have this as a massive cornerstone of their society? Okay, it might be Ukraine, it might be Russia, it might be some of the Eastern blocs of these countries. What would it be like as a cultural experience for her to learn that activity in the native language? I think that would be pretty rad, to be honest. I like, reading some of the books, not just in English. Okay, there's an English translation, but sometimes I like to read literature in Spanish because that was the original language that it was created in. So it's like you can have such a deeper experience of things by going down the rabbit hole of learning additional languages.